Hello, good morning to you all. Welcome to Sunrise Daily. Today, I am Chamberlain.
And I'm Ayo Makine. Good morning. Welcome to the program. Today is a Tuesday morning, it's October the 10th, and you are most welcome to the program.
Yeah, so, in some parts of Abuja, we're beginning to see some queues, fuel queues. So, I'm not sure it's the same thing in other parts of the country. Yes, we do know that the GMD of NNPCL did make some comments yesterday about us having enough supply, but they always say that, don't they? Whenever these kind of things happen, yet we see queues in different parts. So we're hoping that this, just as he said that they've got enough, will ensure that those things don't happen. So if they do have enough and they say there shouldn't be any queues, why then don't they do something about the queues? Is it holding because some of these stations just reduce their sales points to 2, some 3, even if they had 10 pumps? And so what do you expect if you have the same amount of people, on a regular basis coming to purchase that product, and then if you usually have like 8, 10, you reduce it to 2, 3, of course there will be that kind of scenario, but we'll talk about that much later. Some of the dailies do highlight why we may be experiencing queues or the causes of those queues. But this particular perspective, what the Minister of Aviation, Mr. Festus Keyamo, SAN, did say yesterday, has been a long, hard road for Nigerians who many have just thrown their hands up in the air and given up with the system in terms of why can't they just get things right. I'm talking about when you even have money for the services, you pay for the services, yet you don't seem to be making any headway. Let's let you listen to this first and foremost, and then we'll come back.
On delayed flights, I want to speak for Nigerians now, the ordinary Nigerians who complain every day. Delayed flight, cancelled flight. I know you have said all your reasons. You have blamed government. You blamed a few things that we do. But I also want to say that it is not all the time that it is governmental. So don't make and run here. At times when he says they are passing through screening machines and they are waiting for passengers to pass through screening machines. At times they are finished passing through screening machines. They are waiting in the lounge for 5 hours, airpiece, and you cancel your flight. It is not a screening machine. So I want to appeal. It is not every time bed strikes. It's not every time. So please, you see, after some time we'll start implementing the provisions of the NCA Act. Nigerians don't know that there's compensation for delay. If it is if it's act of God, you cannot pay. But if it is human fault, NCA Act says you will pay. So for all airline operators, why I have praised you, why I have supported you, I will support Nigerians too. You will pay them all. After some time, I will put my feet on the ground. Pay them. When you delay their flights, you cancel their flights.
So there you go. But this is a very, very serious matter for several people. And it just appears as though, and that's why sometimes when we talk about an airline industry, many will say, do we really have an airline industry in the true sense of the word? You saw the name of the airline, you heard the name of the airline, he mentioned it, but there's several others who are culpable in all of this. And they seem to think that, well, there's nothing the system can do to us because they, as he was trying to say there, they largely blame it on the system. But there's a lot of responsibility on the civil NCAA and all the other aviation authorities as he was speaking there, because look, even after you get your ticket, first they need to determine, because when the airlines say, well, there's government movement, VIP movement, and as a result of that, the flights are delayed, they need to draw the line. Because there's several things, because look, when they tell you time is money and time is spent, you can't actually plan properly. Because when you do plan, the plan never comes to fruition, because these airlines, for the most part, just almost always, if not always, I can't remember when last you went through all of those airlines without your heart being in your mouth, wondering, oh dear, will I do this? Can this happen? Will it actually be this way? And that's why, I mean, some of the airlines who came and then came up with a niche that they have to stick with time, look at the kind of traffic they've been able to gather. But look, passenger bill of rights does exist. And many have tried to leverage on that. You succeed in some cases. In many other cases, it's just non-existent. They tell us that the airlines are supposed to, the airports are supposed to have those passenger bill of rights right there so that when you get there, you see them and you hold them accountable to it. And then passengers' rights as well, the NCAA themselves, who are supposed to also enforce all of those things, how much of it do they do? So it's a lot, really, because, look, we can't begin to tell you a litany of complaints that exist about airlines who, because, look, flight cancellation, delay is one. And in several other cases, you get to buy your ticket today, they can't even refund your money, even when you have followed through with all the processes, because they feel that, look, they can't sanction us, they can't suspend us, because if they do, they know they'll feel the impact. So it's going to be up to the government to see if they can bite, not just bark, because if they're all laughing there, they might consider it as a laughing matter, because they will think, look, we're all in this together. And after all, if you cause the VIP movement, if nature happens, how do you then blame us for all of those? But it's a huge and very, very serious matter, because if we have to actually take the economy and the country and the citizens serious, we need to do something about this.
I don't think the minister needs to wait any longer to begin to enforce, not just implement, enforce the passenger bill of rights and some of the provisions that the NCAA, that's the NCAA Act, has already given Nigerians the responsibility for. You talked about the passenger bill of rights. It was in 2013 that it was reported that the Federal Airports Authority of Nigeria said the passenger's bill of rights has been introduced to protect the rights of air travelers in the country. And the NCAA is the one that introduced the passenger bill of rights and encouraged everyone to access it at the time. What are some of the contents? There's an instance that if, for instance, your flight is billed for 7 a.m., there is a limited number of hours that your flight can be delayed for, after which you are entitled to a meal, and the number of hours in which it can delay before you are taken to a hotel. Then the number of hours within which it is expected that you will be paid a penalty plus a refund of your money if you don't want to fly anymore. I don't know why the minister feels the need to wait a little longer to implement or to enforce that law, because, I mean, mentioning one airline is one. There are a good number of people who will remember some predecessors of such an airline who had that attitude or habit of constantly delaying for hours. In fact, the minister mentioned 5 hours. Just imagine 5 hours seated on hard surface for those who are not comfortable doing that all of their lives just because you're waiting for a particular flight. And delay for whatever number of hours, just imagine, first of all, what it does, then the economic harm it imposes on the nation and on the person who is supposed to go do some business. So we'll expect that the minister, while he was speaking to some stakeholders in the industry there, and he's also said he's speaking for Nigerians, some Nigerians most certainly want to see how the minister is going to tackle that, and whether there is some oligarchy that is going to, stand in his way of implementing that, because it is really understandable that the airlines are having a hard time on their hands. Chimele, you spoke about fuel when we began. Most certainly the same thing happening in the energy supply for airlines. It is understood. Energy supply or fuel supply, to power anything and everything that has to do with airports, airline services, all those things are well understood. But unfortunately, it is the hazard of the industry. We understand that there is an airline in this country that has cut its air travel fare simply because another airline is going into the same market. So that's the kind of thing that I think Nigerians would want to see. I understand that there is a flight that flies from Lagos to Ibadan, I think. It's less than 10,000 naira. And all of these things the opportunities are there, limitless and matchless in a manner of speaking. So if there is going to be a delay, it'll be good for one to even know ahead so that adjustments can be made. But we wait for the minister to come up with that marching order, not just a blueprint now, a marching order to airline operators. We understand that you're having your own challenges, but so is everyone who is going to fly on your aircraft or fly your service. So please do the needful for us, shall we? Let's make Nigeria great again.
Yeah. You know, that's just as we said, there's just so many areas. And besides, pricing is not just with the aviation industry. We see it across board in several sectors where people unilaterally and arbitrarily just hike prices. There isn't any templates. There isn't any. They just tell you, well, some tell you, well, even when you get to the markets, you wonder. They tell you, oh, no, the dollar is that. This is this. And then phew, the prices are hiked. And you wonder, even when these things fluctuate and international markets, the prices go down, it never comes down in this part of the world. So there's just several things that we need to ensure that there's always a method to the madness. But here, look, for these airlines, when NCA introduced this, and Mr. Uresi at the time when it was the MD said, look, this will ensure that the airlines are checked. They will take passengers a lot more seriously. How many years down the line now, guys? And yet, look at how things are still playing out in that same industry. So we'll see if Mr. Keyamo will put his foot down and leave a legacy so that people can know that you cannot take customers for granted after they have paid and entered into a contract with you. He knows the implication of you violating certain contracts. They need to ensure that they sit up. Don't keep taking people for granted. If we need to move this country forward, certain things like that, they may look small to you, but they have huge significance going forward.
Yeah.
All right, let's go ahead and take you through some of the dailies here today. Take a look at New Telegraph. You know, when you said that, or when we highlighted the NNPC GMD, making some comments about certain things. You see New Telegraph here today. Bad roads, rivalry, liable for fuel queues. Yari, I want to advise you to run with this headline because it could get you upset. Just like that, because well, let me see if the riders could help you. It says, government not subsidizing fuel as NNPCL recovers full cost from imported products. Firm, now sole importer of fuel, has over 1.4 billion liters of products in marine land. Nigeria to become net exporter of petroleum products by 2024. So there's so many questions here, really. First of all, bad roads, rivalry, on the face of it. These are some of the reasons why is it the PTD, the tanker driver, different groups embark on strike. And many times, many Nigerians think that these things are flimsy excuses for them to embark on strike, calling on relevant authorities to fix the roads so that they can ply the roads and deliver the petroleum products, which is very key in moving the economy forward. But now when you get to hear this, that's why I would say, look, this headline could just exacerbate certain things. So does it, in the manner of speaking, justify why they always say bad roads, we're going on strike or protesting because we want to call attention to the state of the roads? Why should the roads be in those kind of shape in the first instance? Don't they have governments? Don't they have several states always have commissioners of works? They have funds budgeted to all of those places. They have schedules. Funds are expended. Go to those civil service and the ministry. You see funds, receipts, documents of roads that have been built and spent taxpayers' money on, and yet they're in very terrible shape. But now he says they are sole importer of fuel. And then you ask, hasn't that always been the case? By the way, all of those petroleum products that were brought into the country, remember the bad fuel scenario some time ago that several cars were affected? Has anybody heard anything about all of that? I know, your guess is as good as mine. Okay, and then as though that were not enough, look at what you find at the bottom strip here. 12 kg cooking gas price rises to 13,500 naira. I know we did highlight this some time ago, just giving you popular prices across the country in terms of what several people were facing and how they needed to call attention to that, because palliatives or not, those who need this product need to get it. And now, if it keeps fluctuating this way, you could only wonder. That's New Telegraph this morning.
Tends to tow a similar path, only this time he's speaking directly to the subsidy conversation. The lead story on the front page of Daily Independent gives you this. FG denies subsidy return, says market determines fuel price. That's the lead story. Tinubu saved NNPC from bankruptcy. That's ascribed to Mele Kyari. Nigeria to be a net exporter of petroleum products by 2024. Find details of that continue on the inside pages. Right under the picture on the front page, payment for revitalization of tertiary institutions underway, ascribed to the minister. And the ASU president seems to be stepping on toes, shall we say? Godfatherism has crept into university system. What does that mean? The details continue on the inside pages. An ex-CBN deputy governor is raising an alarm. Why Naira may continue to lose value by ex-CBN deputy governor. What does that mean? The details are on the front page and doesn't sound like the kind of news that we want to have, but it is our reality. Right, the 4 stories on the sideline there. One of them, court sentences police officer to death for shooting lawyer dead. Remember the Bolanle Rahim story? That's what that is about. Find the details on page 29 of the paper this morning. Tinubu boosts media team, appoints Drotoye, Wabufo, Akigbe, others. Stories on page 7. That's the Daily Independent this morning.
Next, scarcity of diagnostic services cripples cancer care in southeast states. So, as though they've not been battered on all sides when you talk about certain investments and security, then you have this in the health sector. Yeah, we know the health sector is taking a beating across the country, both responsibilities for the primary, tertiary healthcare, well, in a bad shape. I know the former SGF, that's a famous quote. I don't think many will forget it in a hurry, where he did say, during that time of COVID, they didn't know that it was that bad in the health sector. And after that, we then wondered, so what have we done? What have we done? Well, the new health ministry, he was here, and we did ask him several questions too about the health sector. But with this, you'll expect that, okay, let me even read out a lot more of this infographics that they've got here. 22 million residents of Southeast have limited cancer diagnostic machine in public tertiary facilities. Residents depend on private facilities or referred to other regions. No mammography machine until 2007. Absence of MRI machines. Refurbished Oncology Center of UNTH opened 2 weeks ago. So that's a picture of what the Southeast is grappling with in terms of the health sector. Of course, you know there'll be questions about the commissioners of health, the government in the Southeast. So if this is the case, so all that they have always said they've done, this is a test, this is a result of what exists. So have they been doing things on paper, and then in reality, the reverse is the case? So that's a big one. We're hoping that they can step in and fill up this because it is huge, I tell you. So big question mark now for the Southeast, as the Guardian here highlights.
The Leadership newspaper has this on its front page, talking about statistics, Chamberlain. Look at the front page of the Leadership newspaper, and it isn't any more cheering. Insecurity, 60,000 schools vulnerable to attacks nationwide. Not good news, is it? Stories on page 4. And look at the infographics on the front page. 9 years after, Safe School Initiative struggles. 21,000 fully covered under Safe School Initiative. 2, NSCDC trains response team in Northeast, North Central. And 3, to deploy female squad in volatile areas. Find the details of that on page 4 of the Leadership newspaper this morning. Right beside that one, fuel subsidy has not returned, Kyari insists. Stories on page 17. And of course, a good number of people may have caught the news yesterday about some rumors. Go on alive, hale and hearty, according to Baggy. Find the details on page 4. Right under the nameplate, telecom operators want tariff hike over operating costs. Okay. I don't know what to make of that, but shall we appeal that you wait until the minimum wage, the living wage is in force? That's the Leadership newspaper this morning.
Oh dear. Well, let's look at Nigerian Tribune next. FG no longer paying fuel subsidy, Kyari affirms. And then when the writer says subsidy payment almost bankrupted NNPC. Nigeria will export petrol in 2024. NNPCL now sole importer of petrol. Private companies can't access Forex. So all of that you heard hush-hush before is validated now in terms of the difficulty of accessing Forex to get petroleum products. And he says NNPC now sole importer of petrol. And so when you see this, you wonder, as we did highlight previously, we thought they had told us before that once upon a time they were. Okay, so probably after that, private sector came in, they could access Forex for some time, and then all of a sudden they can't access Forex anymore. Okay. And by the way, had they ever told us when we take this crude and then refine it out there and bring it back, what about, remember they were, even the same experts, professionals came here and told us, we should actually be getting a lot more, much more than what we're getting, because they don't talk about the byproducts of the crude that we take out there. That's huge. Would they ever answer that question? Well, might as well think about that. And then let's see what else is at the bottom strip here. ASP Vandi to die by hanging for killing pregnant Lagos lawyer Bolanle Rahim. So that's a huge, significant one. Unfortunately, that life is gone. So hopefully that this kind of judgment will serve as a huge deterrent. And yes, we know we need to do a lot more in terms of reining in security agencies such that it's not just us and them kind of scenario, because vast majority, I think at least a lot of people who would usually do some private survey, ask questions, always think that the security agencies are skewed against them just to protect those up there against them, because these are the taxpayers. It's supposed to be the other way around, as we see, because they're quick to cite to us, oh no, in that country, that happens. And then they leave out the parts where they're supposed to take responsibility and live up to their ability and be held accountable for how they utilize public funds. Because if they keep hopping and churning down our throat, you must pay your tax, you must do this. And we in turn need to let them know that if you spend one kobo wrongly for that taxpayer's money, you need to face the music as well, because it has to be quid pro quo. What goes around should come around. That's Tribune this morning.
Well said there, Chamberlain. Remember, the TUC has also said that they intend to continue to monitor the progress, or none of it, of the cutting down of the cost of governance. Please, again, we call, let it not just stop at the federal government level. Let it trickle down to the states. Let it not just be to the executive. Let us ask what the legislatures, both at the federal and the state government levels, are doing. The Vanguard newspaper this morning is calling attention to something, an announcement that was made by the president about the recall of ambassadors. And guess what we have on its front page now? Envoys stranded as FG foot drags on implementation. What does that mean? Well, let's see if the riders will help. No machinery in motion for envoys return, according to sources. Say ambassadors yet to receive AIE's cash backing. And there's this one: I won't return without getting my entitlements, envoy insists. Overzealous politicians pressuring, hurting the process, ascribed to Ambassador Keshi. Notes they've destroyed Foreign Affairs Ministry. The details of this you'll find on page 5 of the paper this morning. Above the nameplate, among the plethora of stories there, Jakpa, FG OK's engagement of retired health workers on contract basis. The details of that you'll find on page 8 of the Vanguard newspaper this morning. Israel intensifies attack, enforces total blockade of Gaza, and cuts power supply, food, fuel, drugs. Hamas functions to kill hostages, and a number of other stories, other writers. You'll find the details on page 25. Mr. and Mrs. So Mrs. is protesting, complaining to Mr. Each time I ask for the money to start the business I told you about, you give the harsh economic situation as an excuse. Can you prove that the harsh condition affects everybody? And Mr. simply responds, go to the internet and see how they use the hashtag. As a Vanguard newspaper this morning, bringing to an end a look at some of the dailies, but we're back right after now to take on the issues as they come. Do stay with us.
Dear compatriots,
in a series of many firsts since assuming office as President and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, President Bola Tinubu released his thoughts on Nigeria's 63rd independence anniversary, commencing with appreciation for the nation's founding fathers.
Let us commend our founding fathers and mothers. Without them, there would have been no modern Nigeria. From the fading embers of colonialism, their activism, dedication, and leadership gave life to the belief in Nigeria as a sovereign and independent nation.
In his 15 minutes nationwide broadcast, the president says he's unwavering in his resolve to lay a solid foundation.
Those who sought to perpetuate the fuel subsidy and broken foreign exchange policies are people who will build their family mansion in the middle of a swamp. I am different. I'm not a man to erect our national home on a foundation of mud. To endure, our home must be constructed on safe and pleasant ground.
Perhaps to assuage the agitations by organized labor, the president announces a 6-month provisional wage increment, among others.
Based upon our talks with labor, business, and other stakeholders, we are introducing a provisional wage award increment to enhance the federal minimum wage without causing undue inflation. For the next 6 months, the average low-grade worker shall receive an additional 25,000 naira per month. The new CNG conversion schemes will start coming in very soon, as all hands are on deck to fast-track the usual lengthy procurement process. We are also setting up training facilities and workshops across the nation to train and provide new opportunities for the transport operators and entrepreneurs. Similarly, we are increasing investment in micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises. Commencing this month, the social safety net is being extended through the expansion of the cash transfer programs to an additional 15 million vulnerable households.
President Tinubu also highlights his effort at repositioning the nation's apex bank.
I pledged a thorough house cleaning of the den of malvisions the CBN has become. That house cleaning is well underway. A new leadership for the central bank has been constituted. Also, the special investigator will soon present its findings on the past lapses and how to prevent similar recurrences. Henceforth, monetary policy shall be for the benefit of all and not the exclusive province of the powerful and wealthy.
The president, who says he's not insensitive to the hardship associated with bold economic reforms, appeals to Nigerians for understanding and bravery for the future.
We can do it. We must do it.
Jeffrey Uzongo, Channels Television News.
All right, welcome back. Yes, as you've seen there, Mr. Solomon Dalung joins us this morning, the former Minister of Sport and Tourism. Good morning, and thank you for coming on today.
Yeah, good morning, Chamberlain, and good morning, Nigerians.
Well, you know, the comments of the NNPC GMD is all over the place now as a result of summit they had yesterday. And of course, everybody, one way or the other, affected by subsidy removal or whether it stays, whatever policy out there cuts across. You've been in touch with the grassroots, your constituency. You kind of have at least an impression of how they feel about some of these policies. And so tell us, from what you've seen so far, how are these policies affecting the people? Are they coming up on they're getting the short end of the stick, or they think, okay, well, we'll be patient, we'll hope they get it right?
Well, I think when you demand for sacrifice to be exemplary, sacrifice should begin with you as the leader. Then people will follow. That's what the people are referred to as followers. But reverse cannot be the case. The policies on ground we are dealing with, the economic policies, are inhuman policies that have affected the lives of the citizen terribly. And in recent history, Nigerians have not faced terrible situations like the one we are dealing with. The sudden withdrawal of the fuel subsidy without cushioning mechanism on ground, the floating of the naira, and even the attempt by the government to introduce the same method of sharing of money had indeed compounded the whole situation. So you have inflation rising, you have cost of living increasing, and you have people. I mean, Nigerians now cannot afford to eat. So the policy of this government from May 29 had not been too favorable to the common people. And when you said people should sacrifice for a better future, the sacrifice should start with the government. The government should cut cost of living. We should see the government officials behaving in tandem with the policies. But they are living very fine and living very comfortable. The government is having one of the largest cabinets in the history of this country. They are every day appointing special assistants, special advisors. So the cost of governance is increasing while the people are being asked to sacrifice. So to me, the understanding of the sacrifice is that, okay, the living Nigerians today should agree to die for their children, even if they will be alive to live tomorrow.
But there are some who will wonder that, look, what is the significant difference now and during President Buhari's time? Because they will tell you, government is a continuum. We picked up from where we left off. In fact, we've heard some people in government now say, well, look, we took over a very bad economy. Certain things were really not in the best of shape. And then even the former government too didn't exactly reduce drastically the ministries. And so they wonder, the ministers at that time too, they also lived comfortably. So what's the key difference?
Well, Buhari in 2015 actually demonstrated sacrifice because, the ministers were 36 and we were only allowed to appoint one special assistant and one PA. I lived in the hotel for 6 months without accommodation. I spent 4 years as a minister using my private vehicle because the vehicles we inherited 4 months into our office killed one of our colleagues and his wife and son. So everybody abandoned it. So indeed, we sacrificed, and that yielded benefit because within a short period of time, we were able to move Nigeria out of recession to 2.7% growth. That was sacrifice. The Jumbo cabinet was from 2019, which, of course, I still disagree with the president. Why that sudden change? Now, the argument by people in government that, we inherited this, we inherited, is the same APC government. Even myself, who has left APC, cannot exonerate myself from the current situation Nigerians are facing because I was part of those who went around in 2015 to mobilize Nigerians, promising them change. And as at 2023, the indices of change had retrogressively reversed back to even pre-2015. I don't think that argument makes sense. The president said, do not pity me. I looked for the job and I got it, meaning he knew the situation before he contested. Most of the people who are defending this were also in Buhari's government. So are they now saying that the exit of Buhari in May 29 changed things? No. It's not a new government. It's the same APC, the same manifesto. So they have no defense. It's just like the case of a lazy woman trying to blame his tools.
When you say that the government of Buhari did all of that, and they set example, but we see several reports too that came from different international agencies who measured how things turned out at the time. And then I also do remember, I saw that report too in 2021, how it was the US described, there was this 2020 country report on human rights practices, which was released by US Department of State. And then in that sector, there was a part in that report, in section 4, which focused on Nigeria. It was titled Corruption and Lack of Transparency in Government. And they said that although, in fact, to cut it short, they said there was massive, widespread and pervasive corruption which affected all levels of government, including the judiciary and security services. And so in spite of the picture that you paint, they tried to do certain things, but this was the kind of damning report that came through at the time.
Yeah, what I actually said was, I was trying to justify what self-sacrifice means in leadership. But in terms of the performance of Buhari's government in 8 years, you have to measure the government with the commitment, the democratic commitment, the promises the government made. Now, the war against corruption was one of the major promises we made to Nigerians in 2015. And the government did not at all succeed in delivering, in fighting corruption. Rather, monumental corruption surfaced worse than pre-2015.
In Buhari's government?
Yes, because I take an instance. In one transaction, the Accountant General of the Federation was accused of misappropriating 1.9 billion naira. That's one transaction under our watch, under Buhari's government. And that is the government that promised to fight corruption. Under the same Buhari's government, during the COVID, in NDDC, 81 billion was spent during the COVID by that agency. It became an issue that was investigated by the National Assembly, and it turned into a comedy where the GMD was invited and he suddenly fainted and the issue died as he collapsed also. And there are so many instances of some of these corrupt practices unheard of that were mentioned in the government. So the report is pointing to the fact that the government promised to fight corruption, but corruption appears to have overwhelmed the government and defeated it. I'm not disputing the report.
How did this kind of matters, because when the public reads it, and then they always wonder how the government handles it. So while you were in government at the time, did this kind of matters ever come up in FEC? What was the disposition of the ministers, the president too at the time?
You see, to be very fair to the Federal Executive Council of our time, we discussed these things and we took the president and whosoever that is involved. These things are discussed. There were some, quite brave and great men and women in that cabinet that could look at the president in the face and raise these issues. But you see, the way government operates is that those of us who were raising these issues earn for ourselves the names of enemies of the government, because Nigeria is like a crime scene where this is known to be wrong and in violation of the law, but you still have people trying to offer explanation and defend it. So some of these things were actually dealt with, they were tackled, but of course they end at the level of being discussed and nothing happened.
So how come that the president, because many thought that he was coming there to sanitize, clean the audience table and ensure that it's no longer business as usual. So when he heard these things and they were discussed in FEC, how come the matters were never stamped out? Because after that case you mentioned, there were several other cases of Accountant General who were answering questions about how they misappropriated trillions of naira.
In leadership, there's what is called political will. And in the entire leadership of this country, from 1999 to now, I think there was only one person who had the political will to tackle issues frontally, and that is Obasanjo. Most Nigerian leaders try to evade dealing with these issues for political consideration, looking at their ambition. So or if I do this, I might not likely be re-elected. That traveled along with us from after Obasanjo till death. Because most of these things are known, the suspects are known, but the political will to deal with it is not there. Even now, I don't seem to see the political will to deal with corruption. Because there are so many people now that are holding strategic position that they are guests of EFCC. But they are still holding position in government. So if that political will of dealing with corruption is there, if I were the president of Nigeria, I will start with myself. I will have to purge myself first. If my hands are stained, I will behave like Murtala. So, okay, when I was the Minister of Youth Transport, I extended my hands into the coffers of the government. This is what I touch. I'm refunding it. But Chamberlain, I'm not going to spare you. So that we can stamp it out. But this idea of, recycling people with cases of corruption hanging on their necks and recycling them into government position is a clear definition of the absence of the political will to deal with corruption. So corruption is standing taller and stronger than anybody in this country.
There are several comments that are credited to you, some of which did say that you say that former President Buhari is living in regret and that he didn't perform properly. I think the words of he failed, and so things didn't go right. Well, did you actually say those things?
Well, what I said was that President Buhari did not fulfill the promises he made to Nigerians. But if it is referred to as failure, yes, he failed to fulfill the 3 or 4 promises he made to Nigerians in 2015, which we went around and campaigned. First, he promised Nigerians we were going to address the issue of insecurity. Insecurity escalated under the APC regime from 2019 to now, an alarming proportion that till date, schools, education is the worst victim of insecurity. Children do not even want to go to school. Now, they hate to hear school because what is associated with school is kidnapping. That started happening under the APC government. The issue of corruption, we've discussed about it. Corruption now is moving everywhere looking for people. You have to be careful, otherwise corruption will gun you down. Those in government, they are still answering questions with EFCC and they are in government. So corruption is everywhere. We fail in that. The issue of the economy. Of course, when we came in 2015, I remembered, my extra code, the exchange rate was 189. But now is 700, 800. In 2015, a bag of rice was around 7,000. Today is getting to 60, 70. From Abuja to Jos was just 700, 800. Today is 5,000, 6,000. So there are so many indices indicating that the economy is in shambles. We didn't succeed. We didn't succeed in addressing the issue of insecurity. We didn't succeed in addressing the issue of corruption. These are our promises. So you judge somebody, you judge his performance by the promises. Now, if you go to the issue of road construction or infrastructure, which is touted by so many, till date, Abuja to Kano, over 8 years, still remains uncompleted. We approved in 2016 the contract of the dualization of Jos, Abuja, Akwanga, Jos, Bauchi, Gombe, Adamawa. Up to now, the contractor has not mobilized to site. But in 8 years, we were unable to complete Lagos Ibadan. The dualization of Abuja to Makurdi to Enugu is still. So, what in 8 years did we commission? I think we only commissioned the Dangote refineries, which we promised Nigerians that it was going to go on stream in July, and today it will take angels in heaven to tell us when Dangote refinery will go on stream. So if we are going to measure the success of that government, these promises are what you will use.
At some point when you were in the cabinet, you must have seen some of these signs that, look, we're not fulfilling what we said we were going to do. Did you, I know you mentioned it in passing, did you consistently raise it to the president or the team? And what was the reaction if you did?
You know, President Muhammadu Buhari, to be very fair to me, is somebody who listens. He listens attentively if you are discussing an issue with him. No matter how critical it is to even his person, he will listen to you. If what you are saying is right, he listens. Sometimes he directs. You tell him this, what is happening, the president, this is what is happening, he will direct. I'll give an example of one of the things that happened while we were in government. I mean, there was a face-off between the DSS and the EFCC in Asokoro over 3 days. The president didn't know.
They didn't tell him?
The president didn't know. We went to the Federal Executive Council. And we finished our council. The issue never surfaced. Meanwhile, Nigerians were insulting us, the social media, it was all over everywhere. I took time to address the issue under AOB and asked the president whether he was aware that, I mean, the road with which the taxpayer money is used to sustain has been blocked by agencies in his office, and they were trigger drawn against each other. The reaction of the president indicated to me that he didn't know. So he insisted, I must make myself clear. And I took time to explain to him what has happened. And the president became very, very offended, highly offended. And immediately we left, I saw those people dismantling and running. So you will raise the issue with the president, of course. But the president is such a person that believes in the system. So if I'm complaining against you, he will say, will call you and say, Chamberlain, they said you are not doing your job very well. Can you do your job very well? This is what is against you. That's how he behaves. And people took advantage of that conviction that, oh, I'm doing my own job, others should do it. A lot of funny things happen around him. But when we were in cabinet, there was no breathing space for anybody. There were some two, three great men that I still respect in that cabinet that did not keep quiet within the 4 years that we were there. There were very contentious issues that we tackled them. The president agreed with us. When we thought some of them were corrected, some still lingered today.
But the public had the impression at the time that the president wasn't forceful with the cabinet, that anybody could do anything in the cabinet and seem to get away with it, and that when he gives you a job to do, he trusts you, he allows you to do the job, and so he let things go that way.
Well, I mean, when we came in, we still saw that worry in him. But when the president took ill and recovered and came back, the president was not as pushful as he were before he took ill. So to some extent, I mean, a lot of people took advantage of the nature of his person, do a lot of things that were not right. I will still attest to you that Buhari remains the Buhari I know. Buhari is such a person that believes that because I cannot take 10 kobo, you, Chamberlain, cannot also do. And I kept telling him each time I engage him that that is not correct. It's not correct. Human beings are not the way you think, and they are not like you.
When you say that, you know, he didn't know about that disagreements with the DSS and EFCC, but he also let the public know that he listens to the press, he reads, he watches, he keeps tab. Is that not the case?
Well, you know, the president could be so busy with the issue of news. I can attest to the news. I knew that the president does not play with his listening to BBC 7 o'clock in the morning, listening to Voice of America. That one, he observed it religiously. As to reading of papers, I think I cannot attest to it, but some of the things that happened while we were in cabinet attested to the fact that, I mean, he might not be too religious with the issue of reading of the papers. But you see, as a president, he's entitled to a security report that daily should provide him with an insight as to what is happening. But there was a complete betrayal of the Buhari's presidency by so many people who work with him. I mean, some of us were not too honest to him to have guided him right, because he trusted us and brought us to help him. So if we were honest to him, Buhari is somebody that loves listening to the truth. He will listen, no matter how bitter it is, he will listen to you. The only thing that will be the missing link is his ability to translate whatever you tell him into action. Because if you don't see action, you know that what you have said has not actually been translated well.
All right, we'll go to break, but we'll come back and explore some other grounds in just a moment. Don't go away.
When you sweat, you lose ions too. Reach for Pocari Sweat, similar to your body fluid. It is easily absorbed and rehydrates you faster. Replenish your ions with Pocari Sweat Iron Supply Drink.
Southwood. Fine furnishings for your home and office. Southwood is a Nigerian company dedicated to improving the quality of workplaces and homes. Our space planning and craftsmanship allows you to create a highly customized and comfortable office environment for hardworking and busy executives. Southwood solutions are perfect for today's flexible work cultures. Teamwork, transparency, collaboration. A well-designed and comfortable work environment is proven to increase productivity and morale. Our elegant home furnishings provide the ultimate in comfort and quality. Southwood, furnishings that shape your world. Visit us today at southwoodnigeria.com. Email us at furniture@southwoodnigeria.com or call 0700-FURNITURE.
It's still Sunrise Daily on Channels Television. Thank you for staying with us. Mr. Solomon Dalung is still with us. He's former Minister of Sports. Well, Mr. Dalung, you know, when you said that, you know, like the former president, you also believe in the system and all, you know, a good number of people always look at the headlights of any engine. The engine of government is, of course, the civil service, but then we only look at those of you in the front lines, the ministers, the president, the senators, but there is always a push, you know, behind that will make any of these things work. And that's where I would like you to address in a number of questions. Let's begin with collaboration. A good number of times you would remember that the former president called out some ministries, departments, and agencies for not working together. Case in point is the DSS and EFCC conversation, the example that you gave earlier. Some of these agencies are supposed to work together, not necessarily because someone has to push them, but because it is their duty to work together. In your opinion, what are those things that inhibited collaboration among the ministries, departments, and agencies that definitely hindered them from being able to fulfill the promises that you said the previous administration was unable to fulfill?
Self-interest and lack of patriotism. Simply put these two together. Because if those who hold such responsibilities are patriotic, they looked at the country and not their personal interest, then they will know that you require a collaboration to succeed in whatever you are doing, and you need the contribution of everybody to be able to make progress. It's not about you trying to impress the president. So the in-house rivalry you find in government is the scramble for relevance within the corridor of power by the head of these agencies. So they abandon their offices, and you will find them scrambling around the president. I mean, you have an office as a head of agency. The country is boiling, and you are busy accompanying the president to the airport as if you are his PA carrying his bag. What business has a national security advisor to follow the president? Are there no security apparatives that are supposed to take care of the president? What business has the Minister of Defense to be following the president, going to the airport to receive the president while they are attacking our schools and kidnapping our students? So it's just self-interest and lack of patriotism.
Very interesting choice of words. But then the impact of that, the lack of collaboration on the security apparatus of state is very, very telling. It would also seem like there was a poverty of collaboration between federal agencies and state agencies as well. Case in point is security. Case in point also is our relationship with young people. You have been Minister of Youth and Sports Development. Can you tell us, what challenges there are in terms of a collaboration or a lack of it between the federal government and states that's made it so difficult for us to significantly, effectively, and sustainably engage young people in Nigeria?
The lack of understanding of the federal structure of Nigeria and democracy itself. Because Nigeria is a federation made up of a central government and federating units. Now, these federating units are autonomous constitutionally. Therefore, cohesion and smooth operation of government can only be possible with collaboration. And then having a national agenda with which, the federating units will key into it, still, despite the fact that they will still maintain their peculiarities as federating units. This is completely absent. The federal government on its own voyage, the state governments even of the same political party are on their own. They only congregate at the National Executive Economic Council and discuss, but the discussions are neither implemented. They only agree when they are faced with challenges, economic challenges, and they need for federal government to intervene, bail out, and get money for them. These are the things they do. But they do not, in the real sense of either vertical or horizontal federal relationships, try to work together for the harmony of the country. And when you come about interagency relationship, it's so bad and so haphazard that till date, the agencies are on their own. The ministries are on their own. There is no single collaboration. And it goes back to what I said earlier on. The seeking of self-relevance by the head of the agency, seeking for favor before the president. So everybody is gravitating to the president, seeking to please him. When I was in cabinet, I only go to see the president when I have issues. But there were people who will abandon their ministries, and they were always around the president. So some of us who were not always coming were not seen as serious people. Some of them even consider it as disloyalty. And this explains why you see the head of ministries of government abandoning their office and driving in convoys to go and receive the president, to go and follow the president, while there are serious government businesses waiting for their attention. So the whole thing is we've not gotten a proper national agenda of leadership. For the youth, you see, the youth in Nigeria are, the best anywhere in the world. I've traveled widely, I've engaged with young people at different countries. Now, I don't seem to see young people that are as good as the Nigerian young people. because no young man anywhere in the world will tolerate what is happening here. There is a complete neglect of the youth agenda, even by government, at the local government level, at the state level. And let me just conclude by saying that we are not even investing much in it. In 2016, go and look at the government of the federal government of Nigeria. There was zero allocation for youth development.
Zero allocation. Can you explain that, sir?
In 2016, the federal government did not appropriate a dime for youth development. It took the intervention of the president by me writing a memo and requesting him to intervene, and funds were appropriated from the White Services Board to assist me in sustaining some of the traditional government functions to youth programs in the year. But the budget that returned from the National Assembly after submitting the budget and defending it was zero. You can still go and correct and confirm it.
How has that been institutionalized now? This question is advised because, I mean, you will not forget at all that post-2019, there was so much disturbance everywhere that led to the issue, the famous NSAS saga, and the dust on that, you know, hasn't quite settled. How do we ensure we don't get back to that if we are not giving attention, as much attention to youths and youth development in the country as we should?
You see, the president of Nigeria needs to engage the state governors on a very serious need to address the youth agenda. During the military government, there were functional youth organizations from the local government, from even the ward level to the national. The youth had platforms of mobilization. The youth were given relevance. The youth were engaged. Their opinions were sought. Opportunities were also created for them. But as it is now, if you look at the state level, most of the youth organizations, the platform for the youth, have been taken over by politicians. The youths are only relevant in Nigeria during election years. They are used for the elections, and thereafter, those of them that are fortunate may be appointed PS or SAs, full stop. You see, the cost of elections in Nigeria is so high that young people cannot participate. If you are going to contest for governorship, they're asking for 30 million. How many young people can afford? So we need to have a clear-cut agenda of youth engagement. And the National Orientation Agency should come on board with the issue of conscientizing the young people and the revival of our national values. All these ones have collapsed. National Orientation Agency should not end up in just giving adverts. Oh, change begins with you. How can change begin with me when the person calling for change has not changed? So we are not quite committed to the issue of youth development, and it must be taken very seriously, because if we are talking about the future, then we must invest in the future.
Thoughtful words there, Mr. Dalung. But back to the issue of collaboration. Tell us, from your own experience as minister, what are the mines, the landmines in the way of any minister who must succeed? What are the things that that minister must do if your party is to deliver the promise of renewed hope? This question is important because a good number of people always point to the civil service. And in recent time, a number of people have been calling out the civil service as being the bane of development, be it at the federal or at the state level. You've operated from the very local government level as a chairman of a local government, and you rose through the ranks up until now. So what are those things that could inhibit the success or failure of any minister in office today, particularly the civil service?
Leadership. Leadership. If you are appointed as a minister, you must first convince yourself, what would you want to be remembered for? When I was appointed a minister, I convinced myself that I will want to be remembered as somebody who had the opportunity and did my best. The civil service, as bad as we may think, derives inspiration from the nature of leadership in place. So if you are appointed a minister and you are welcome into your office with 50 million and you did not question it, of course you have set a tune of the type of leadership you are going to provide. So you're not going to blame the civil servants for whatever they are doing. It all borders on leadership. Nigerians are very fantastic followers. If you are a president today and you tell Nigerians, I am going to fight corruption, they are going to observe you for 3 days. They will see whether your wife is going to exercise constitutional power. They are going to look at the behavior of your children. Once they realize that, oh, you are only speaking, but it's not exemplary, Nigerians will abandon you and they will do whatever they want to do. So these new ministers, if they are serious, they must first convince themselves and provide leadership. But they cannot be involved in things that are shoddy and then expect the civil service to be angelic. It can't be.
Well, Mr. Dalung, on that, you said, and that's perhaps the basis of the question and the basis of the issues being raised. You said, first of all, who will welcome a new minister into office with 50 million naira if they didn't have a system to do such a thing? So that it goes to the issue of some people saying that it is the civil service that sometimes corrupts these people. So what is it within the civil service system that makes such a thing even possible in the first place? And the example also, secondly, perhaps in the same vein, the example of the Minister of Works, Engineer Dave Umahi, also speaks volumes, where he had to, shut the gates to the civil servants in his office because they came late to work. Is that to do with leadership or the system itself that has, for want of a better word, corrupted itself over the years?
I can to some extent concede that you cannot invite an angel to dance in the mud and expect him to return to heaven without a stain. But the system, which is the civil service, is fashioned in a manner that they are not held responsible or accountable. Whatever they do, the public place it on the head of that particular ministry. That is why if you are in charge of the ministry, you must do everything possible to ensure that some of these anomalies, some of these corrupt practices that is within the system, you have no relationship with it and you try to deal with it headlong. Fighting of this corruption, why it has always failed, is that heads of agencies do not even fight corruption in their agencies. So if they are involved in giving the body languages that this is, we endorse this, then certainly it will continue. But we have also a systemic challenge within the civil service structure that encourages and facilitates some of these problems we are talking about. But leadership is fundamental in all this.
Mr. Dalung, in May 2019, there were several headlines at the time that you kept mute about this IAAF when they mistakenly overpaid us. I think it was about $130,000, and you didn't speak up at the time. Many went to town saying that was clear corruption and we shouldn't have, that it was a disgrace. What happened?
Well, I did speak then, but you see, those who carried the message trust what tell the public. What actually happened was that we were entitled for some of this support from the International Athletics Federation for support of some of the national competition we had within. So they, according to them, were supposed to have sent about 30,000 or so thereabout, but they ended up sending $130,000. Now, the federation wrote back to the accountant of IAF. He confirmed that that was what Nigeria was entitled for. Now, the money was spent by the federation. Unfortunately, as at the time the money was released and the event took place, I had dissolved the national federations in preparation for election. So there was an interim leadership in place. So after the new leadership came on board, the International Athletics Federation now wrote that it was a mistake. They were not supposed to have sent such particular amount of money to us. I questioned them that, but this amount was released, you confirm. How now, after about a year, you are turning around to say you sent us more than what was anticipated? This was the basis of the problem.
But there were some reports that said that you refused to speak because you said the letter was not directed to your office, and so you wouldn't speak.
No, I spoke on the issue, but of course I had no direct relationship even with the issue because it's the issue between an international federation and a national federation. So the ministry was not involved in any way. But we were only supposed to have hold the national federation accountable for the funds. How do they spend it? But of course, you know, the relationship between the ministry and this international federation is that of non-interference. So the moment, as a minister, you begin to ask questions, they run back to the international federation, and you will be accused of interference.
But there were also records that you did say that you were calling on the EFCC to investigate the NFF, that there were cases of corruption in the NFF at the time. Was that right?
Yeah, I wrote, not even calling. When I was appointed a minister, there was a damning report from FIFA online accusing the NFF of not being able to account for $2 million. So I invited the leadership and showed them the report and demanded that they should explain to me what happened. In return, they submitted what they submitted to FIFA that led to that damning report. So I was dissatisfied, and I wrote and invited EFCC to investigate. EFCC investigated the federation, and the interim report given to me by the then EFCC acting chairman Amagu said, no, Minister, you were not right. The amount is even more than 2 million that you are talking. So as at 2019, before I left, they couldn't turn in report. I went to Magu several times demanding for a report that was none. So I felt I don't want to leave and somebody will now drag my name into the mud. So I wrote the president and said, there was corruption in NFF. I petitioned EFCC. But for over 4 years, they couldn't turn in a report. Then Magu now, as a result of that, wrote a comprehensive report, which I still hold a copy, sent the president and gave me my own copy, inducting the NFF of being unable to account for about 11 billion. I have the EFC report. But till date, nothing has happened. The Oblast Committee, when EFCC failed to act, the Oblast Committee got wind of it and invited me. I went there and then wrote a statement. They took the issue up, charged those officers who had something to do with it to court, but you know, the superior powers within the corridor of the power base came in, and as I'm talking, the issue is still there, but I have a report.
So as we wind down now, you must have been disappointed when you did not return as minister. Was that because you failed to perform?
Well, I think I still have outstanding records, my performance that nobody had been able to challenge till date.
Why were you dropped?
There were so many reasons, I think, but I think God didn't wanted me to go back. But I think a very, very toxic tongue of mine in terms of addressing of issues and not sparing certain toes within the power base played a role.
So are you saying that there was a cabal in government at the time?
Even now, there is a cabal. Even as I'm talking to you, there is a cabal in Tinubu's government.
How do you mean?
Cabal will always exist. Cabal is a group of ambitious people who has different ambition from the leader that exists within the power base to hijack power to project their own interests. That's a cabal. They exist till today.
You know some of them in this government?
There is a cabal in this government. If there was no cabal, how would the ministerial nominee from Kano State found his name into the list, went to the National Assembly before he was turned back? That is the sign of a cabal in any government.
But Mr. Dalung, if they offered you a ministerial position, wouldn't you accept it?
Now,
yes.
You know, ministerial position is not to serve an individual. It's to serve your country. Why I agreed to serve under Buhari is because of the covenant I have with Buhari. I cannot agree to come and serve with Chamberlain who would padlock my mouth. I will not serve you. I'm not going to last.
So, but this government you will accept if they offer you?
On the condition that they will not padlock my mouth. They must tolerate my mouth as it is.
I'd like you to look at this picture because it was something that you tweeted at the time, very recently, as a matter of fact, and many were wondering, why would you go ahead and tweet this, your certificate from University of Jos? Why?
Yes. I surrendered my credentials for public scrutiny because currently there is a very serious international and national brouhaha about the issue of credentials, academic credentials of Nigerians. The president is involved. His political allies are going from one court to the other in America and in Nigeria about credentials. Now, what is going on has placed every Nigerian who holds a certificate under suspect. So I have also put my own. If anybody is not satisfied, he can also go to court to compel University of Jos to release my transcript.
Were you trying to mock the president with this?
No, I have a lot of respect for President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. I don't envy him with whatever he's going through with this certificate thing. But I think it is being mismanaged by his handlers. Those who are creating more problems for the president on this issue as his handlers, because the more they talk, they introduce new issues that people capitalize on to sort of add more burden on the president. This affects the president directly. So why are some people speaking for him?
Are you still a member of the APC?
I left the All Progressive Congress in 2019 when my conscience convinced me that we're not doing what we promised to do.
After you were dropped?
So many years after I've left office.
So what party are you in now?
Social Democratic Party, the Abiola's party.
But you know, people will say you're saying all of these things now because you're no longer in the APC.
Can I exonerate myself from the APC? I'm a founding member of the APC. I went around everywhere. That's why I take responsibility for the failure of APC, even what they are doing today. Because if we have not convinced Nigerians and caused poor people to scratch cat and donate money for us to bring APC into power, we would have not been here. So till I die, I will not be able to exonerate myself from APC.
Mr. Solomon Dalung, former Minister of Youth and Sport Development, also a lawyer, thank you for coming on today.
Evelyn, thank you for the opportunity.
All right, well, back in just a moment. Stay on with us.
The Chairman Body of Benches Honourable Justice Mary Peter Odili, CFR DSSRS, cordially invites all members of the Body of Benches and aspirants to the bar to the call to bar ceremony scheduled to take place on Wednesday, 11th October 2023 at the Body of Benches complex behind Federal Medical Centre, Jabi District, Abuja by 11 a.m. Body of Benches meeting for members only will hold on Tuesday, 10th October 2023 at the main court of the Supreme Court of Nigeria by 1 p.m. Each aspirant is entitled to one guest only who shall be issued an invitation card at the Nigerian Law School. There will be accreditation for aspirants and their guests at the Moshood Abiola National Stadium commencing at 6 a.m. and ending at 9:30 a.m. on the day of call. Aspirants and guests will be conveyed to the venue of the call in buses designated for that purpose. Only aspirants and guests who have been duly accredited will be granted access to the Body of Benches complex. There will be live coverage of the event on Channels Television. This event is strictly by invitation. Daniel Manasseh Teller, Esquire, Secretary, Body of Benches.
Southwood. Fine furnishings for your home and office. Southwood is a Nigerian company dedicated to improving the quality of workplaces and homes. Our space planning and craftsmanship allows you to create a highly customized and comfortable office environment for hardworking and busy executives. Southwood solutions are perfect for today's flexible work cultures. Teamwork, transparency, collaboration. A well-designed and comfortable work environment is proven to increase productivity and morale. Our elegant home furnishings provide the ultimate in comfort and quality. Southwood, furnishings that shape your world. Visit us today at southwoodnigeria.com. Email us at furniture@southwoodnigeria.com or call 0700 Furniture.
Thank you for staying with us. Today is World Mental Health Day, October 10 every year. It's an opportunity for people and communities to unite behind the theme, mental health is a human right, a universal human right. And this year, the whole conversation is around our minds, our rights. Two people join us this morning. Professor Taiwo Bindo is president of the Association of Psychiatrists in Nigeria. He joined us via Zoom from Ibadan, Oyo State, as well as Dr. Otega Okinono, head of Department Sociology and Criminology, and who is also a mental health trainer. She joins us from the University of Delta, Agbo, Delta State. Thank you for joining us. Prof, let's begin with you. You had put out a statement, well, you had conversations where you said two things that are very staggering. One of them is that you said there are more than 60 million Nigerians that are suffering from mental illness. And you also said that in Nigeria we have one psychiatrist to 1 million people. Those are scary statistics. How did we come about these figures, Prof? Prof, can you hear me?
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now, sir? Can you hear me now? Okay, I guess we'll... Can you hear me now, Prof?
Just to confirm. It's getting a bit better.
Okay. Yes. So you had said at various fora that Nigeria has more than 60 million people living with mental illness, one mental illness or all the other. You may want to, first of all, let's begin from there. How did we get to that? What do you mean by that assertion?
Good morning, Nigerians. And as we commemorate this World Mental Health Day, I wish us all a good mental health. Let me put the message in proper perspective. In 2006, Gureje et al., who is the country representative of the World Health Organization, declared that 1 out of 4 Nigerians will have a form of mental health condition in the course of their lifetime. And if you look at 2006 to 2023, is a long haul, and the indices in the country further worsens that particular situation. We have a country where the population is well over 200 million. And if, as at that time, you are calculating 1 in 4, you are looking at over 50 million Nigerians that will suffer one form of mental health condition or the other in the course of their lifetime. And that's exactly what was said. And if you look at where we are now with kidnapping, banditry, headers crisis and all, and you will definitely would know. And then, of course, the pervasive poverty that we go through now, you can be sure that quite a number of Nigerians, more, are actually laboring under one form of mental health condition or the other. That was exactly what I meant by that.
Well, you may want to explain that a little further before we go to Dr. Kinono. I mean, now that you even mentioned crisis areas and all, there are a good number of people who will also be citing the situation. One of the issues which was also raised by the World Health between the World Health Organization and the International Committee of the Red Cross, that in conflict zones or in crisis areas in the country, the issues of mental health conditions have increased by more than 22%. What could have informed that, and is it possible to have staved it off?
Looking at, the scenario, let me paint an issue. In October last year, there was an attempt, not even an attempt, I was kidnapped. And
dear.
Thanks to the totally taken away from the community. And it took a long while for me, my wife, and my daughter to settle down. Usually, when such situation happens, the people that are directly involved are prone to develop stress disorder. Those for developing the PTSD. Those who hear about it also have a higher incidence of developing anxiety. You hear dog barking, your sleep is affected, you become tensed, you are not able to concentrate appropriately, and you have a recurring picture of what happened then such person is suffering from mental health condition. As I speak now, one of our colleagues in Enugu was kidnapped yesterday morning also. And that has also set up a sense of anxiety. Can you move out? If you move out, can you come back home? All that can also lead to mental health condition. Besides anxiety disorders, people develop depression. Of course, as I always say, the mental health condition is not static. It oscillates. Quite a number of Nigerians presently are suffering under a form of distress, and they have one form of mental health symptoms of mental health here and there, even though they may not have developed mental health condition. But quite a number of Nigerians are distressed presently following the pervading poverty. Quite a number of Nigerians are already moved lower on the rung of the social status. And so the catering for developing the coping method, it becomes a major challenge to quite a number of us. And therefore, a number of those who are distressed are further moved into the realm of having a mental health condition, because to make a diagnosis, you need to talk about the duration, you need to talk about the number of symptoms and all that. And quite a number of people have been moved by the nature of what is happening in the country. So it is a known fact all over the world that with significant economic downturn and crises everywhere, mental health condition of the populace worsens. And for your information, even here in Nigeria, those who are meant to actually take care of those who are mentally ill, I'm talking about the mental health practitioners, the number has significantly also dropped. Talk about the psychiatric nurses, the occupational therapists, the clinical psychologists, and all, and the psychiatrists themselves. More have moved out of the country, and therefore we have less than 300 psychiatrists in the country, even to take care of those who are mentally ill. The facility where I work, as Jos University Teaching Hospital, has a capacity of about 30. And because of the prevalence of the use of psychoactive substances also, quite a number of them tend to be chronic and they remain in bed. And ability we have the capacity, but the ability to admit those who are mentally ill is becoming reduced. So you can look at that and see that many are laboring. And also, out of those who have mental illness, less than 10% actually are able to access care. And that big gap of about 90% is what that those who are still finding it difficult to access appropriate care. And so those are the issues that we need to contend with presently. The way also, because this year's Mental Health Day is the theme is the fact that mental health is the right of everybody.
It's very interesting, Prof, when the way you're making all of this sound, and it'll be good for people to really get better understanding, because when we talk about mental illness, and you say that a good number of people may not even know that they are manifesting symptoms of those things. Let's bring Dr. Otega Okinono in on this conversation. Well, Dr. Okinono, your specialty in this area seems to be in the area of mental health in the workplace. First of all, if you want to help us understand what that means and how serious this situation could be. Dr. Okinono, can you hear me?
Sorry about that, please.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you clearly.
Yeah. So I'm not sure if you got the question that I'm asking. I mean, since your specialty is in the area of mental health in the workplace, how dire is the situation, if it is?
Thank you very much, Mr. Ayo, for bringing me in. I think there are concepts that we need to clarify about mental health. Mental health, it's not a negative condition. Mental health is a condition whereby the individual is socially, emotionally, psychologically, and if you want to add spiritually balanced. That is a good mental health. The issue we want to address is mental health disorder. How can people have, a positive mental health? And that is what I have been doing for quite a number of years now, talking about balanced and positive mental health at workplace. If you agree with me, every workplace, every organization has its challenges and the ups and downs, no matter how organized it might be. There are challenges you encounter at your place of work. How are you able to address all of this? How are you able to cope with the pressures of work? How are you able to balance your role at home and even at the workplace? And then how are you able to balance the social dynamics that occur at the workplace? So I advocate that people should be mindful of their mental health at workplace. And how can you be mindful of your mental health when you don't even know what mental health entails, when you don't even know how to maintain a positive and balanced mental health? There are different ways you can maintain a positive and balanced mental health. Number one, you must agree and realize that pressures, conflicts, disagreements, challenges are inevitable. They are part of human existence. So these are some things you need to put, behind your mind as you go to work, even in the family. You must realize that you are going to meet some of these challenges. And so how do you prepare yourself in handling all of this? For example, at the workplace, how do you manage stress from your colleagues, stress from your bosses, stress from even your subordinates? Maybe there are some, they give you targets to meet up with target. How do you balance it up? First of all, you must be able to set your priorities. You must be able to set your priorities. You must be able to set goals. And even as you set goals, there must be priorities to those goals.
Well, Dr. Kinono, my apologies for butting in. One of the things that makes that a little difficult to comprehend or to even to live by is that life today seems to be undulating. Economic realities of many people in various parts of the world, Nigeria no less, is undulating. Today, you deal with certain economic realities. Tomorrow, it's not the same. It's perhaps even worse for business owners. And consequently, it's only natural for anyone to act out when things aren't going in a particular direction. And don't also forget that every individual, particularly adults, have different levels of life to line up. You work in a place, you report to a boss or you report to certain stakeholders. You are a married man or married woman, you have children, you have parents. All of these things are demands on the person's psyche. If these realities are as they are, and as Professor Obindo has said, we cannot run away from certain realities that manifest themselves in a way that puts us at risk. Then what can anyone really, really do to tackle these things, knowing that it is important to balance them all?
That's a very good one. Now, like I said earlier on, that all of these, they are inevitable. I talked about social dynamics, you understand, undulating structures in society, at the place of work, in these different social structures. Now, how can you handle a thing you don't even have the least understanding about? That is why the awareness has to increase. For me, before I got into mental health training, I never knew some of these things. Most times I get apprehensive, I get, overburdened with work challenges, life crisis, and all of that. I didn't have the least idea. I didn't even understand the symptoms. I didn't even know how to set boundaries. I didn't even know how to identify. Now, we must, first of all, know exactly how to handle all of this. And first of all, we must educate people to face the reality that society cannot be static. Society is dynamic. Things must change, either for good or for bad. So we must prepare their minds. We must educate them to know that these things are inevitable in society. So when you see them, when you encounter them, how do you handle them? Which is why this theme, mental health, for this year, is mental health as a universal right. That is a different topic entirely. Now, let me answer you straight. We need to create more awareness of mental health. We need to create more awareness of taking care of yourself. Mental health is not just merely the absence of disease. You understand? Some persons could look physically fit, but they have mental health challenge, even without them knowing they have mental health challenge, because they do not know the symptoms that goes with it. So the focal point should be more awareness That is exactly what channels television and other social media platforms are also doing. We should create more awareness from the grassroots, from communities, place of work. Nobody is above mental health issue or challenge. The rich, the poor, the old, the young. You understand? It doesn't, discriminate. Everybody is vulnerable to having one mental health challenge or the other.
Okay.
But we must be able to know all of this before we can handle mental health issues at workplace.
All right. Professor, let me ask you, Professor Bindo, one of the revelations that you have made known, which you also mentioned here, is that the standard is, I mean, you said it once before, that the standard is that one psychiatric doctor should take care of 10,000 patients. But today we have one psychiatric doctor to over 1 million Nigerians. I understand well, Professor Bindo is not with us at this moment, but we'll certainly get back to him. Back to you quickly, Dr. Kinono. A good way to, one question to ask you right now is, are there certain jobs or professions or careers that are more endangered than the other in terms of mental health alertness? There are those who would say, okay, maybe I don't really need to be, I'm not really as concerned or shouldn't be as concerned about my mental health. I'm okay, everything is going okay. Are there certain professions or careers that are more demanding in terms of mental health than others? And if there are, you want to help us understand what puts these people in these careers in jeopardy.
Good. Now, what puts them in such a dilemma is the structure of an organization. There are times there are so much pressure. There are some organizations that give you targets. They tell you between so time you must meet a target, you must meet up with expectations. And so when you put people under pressure, a lot of pressure like that, and they know if they don't meet up with such pressures, they might lose their job, they might lose promotion. They put their life at risk in trying to meet up with organizational expectations. So at this point in time, I also want organizations to get, to be adequately enlightened, and then also get the awareness that it's not just about bringing results. You could still maintain a positive mental health and still achieve much. You understand? And then there are also organizations that will give you targets like if you permit me, I will want to use my own career, you understand? Like lecturing job, you need to write papers to get promotion, you need to go to class, you need to teach. If you have an understanding of how to set your priorities, I don't think it's going to be a big issue. Fine. At intervals, you might have some stress that you might not be able to control. You don't have control over them. So what do? After that, you tell yourself, what are my priorities? What are the ones I should do? And you must make some time to bring out all of these. It's a conscious effort. It's not something you just put in there. It's a process. It's something you need to recognize every day of your life, whether you're working in a private sector, in a public sector, you have your own business. Even in your own business, there are times you want to meet up with targets. You want to, because you need to pay your workers, you need to increase profit. But your health, like I tell people, my mental health is my priority. I don't compromise it, okay? So I always tell myself, this can always wait. This can always wait. What I don't have control over, I don't bother myself about it.
Well,
because life must go on.
Well,
so that is my
there are those who would say it's easy for you to say, Dr. Kinono, because you're a lecturer, you probably have other things, But there are a good number of people, just as you said, who are so much under pressure that there is only one source that they have, and that there are some things that they cannot even compromise. But help us understand, first of all, there are times when, as Professor Obindo mentioned earlier, 60 million people in a population of 200 million. That is quite a lot. So what are the symptoms that anyone would manifest that will give the person a reason or a need to go see a specialist to be sure that their mental health is stable? Or maybe ask it better, how does one help himself to ensure stable mental health? Or who does the person need to talk to? What are the signs that the person needs to see before he can say, I think I need to go talk to someone ASAP?
Yeah, thank you. It brings us back to awareness. Like I said, you cannot, you must understand something, the nature of the thing. Understand it before you could find solutions. Somebody, like I said, some persons have mental health challenge or conditions. They don't even know. It's not just the absence of disease, okay? Now, there are some symptoms that you must understand as a person that occurs. Maybe the changes in your body, your sleeping pattern, your eating habits, and then pressures. And then you must understand yourself. You understand? It varies from one individual to another. You see, some people, they don't know how to work. Some people don't know how to work under pressure. Some people do better under pressure. So the first thing you should identify, which of course is not just something that is brief, physical fatigue. You are always fagged out, you're always wear out, you're always tired, you're not okay psychologically, you're not balanced, you're always feeling tired and stressed out, your eating disorder is changing, your sleeping disorder, you're having sleeping disorder. Maybe you used to sleep 6 hours, you're not sleeping for 2 hours, you have insomnia, and then, memory loss, your retentive memory is no longer so strong, and then you become aggressive. And so there are some changes you must observe. And you cannot understand these symptoms when you don't know what exactly it means. Something that occurs over a long period of time. It's not like having fatigue today and tomorrow it goes off. No, that is not it. Something that persists over a long period of time that has not been in you before, that is abnormal to your body, to your system.
Confirms what Prof also said a little while ago. Let's quickly go back to Professor Bindo. Well, Prof, you mentioned before that we need at least one psychiatric doctor to 10,000 patients. But the challenge we have now is that we have about 1 to 1 million. In your opinion, how do we reverse these figures if it is as serious as you say? And what are the implications if we don't? Can you hear me, Prof?
Yeah, I can hear you. Thank you very much, Ayo. Thank you, Dr. Ortega, for all you have said. I think she started by saying that, talking about mental health. Mental health is different from mental health conditions. Mental health talks about an individual being able to actualize his potential, is able to face what we call normal stresses of life. The person is able to work productively. And then the person also is able to contribute to the society. If there is any departure from this, then the person is not in a full mental health condition. And Dr. Ortega actually alluded to all the symptoms. But coming to your questions about the number of mental health practitioners, I always emphasize that psychiatrists is just one of the mental health practitioners in the country. And then when you look at the psychiatrists, having even the figure for developed world that has actually improved. It's no longer 1 to 10,000. Things have moved even lower, so that they can actually cover a number of people. Yes, we look at what is the cause. Quite a number of psychiatrists that are produced. For instance, I am in Ibadan presently, and we just are about concluding the qualifying exams to produce specialists, consultants in the country. And these are done regularly, twice a year. National College of Physicians, where I am an examiner, are producing regularly. But as soon as they are produced, UK, Canada, ways of, what do you call it, more conducive for people to work out there are available for them to work.
Oh dear.
Well, not very, very friendly network there, but, you know, quite insightful conversations that we have had. Unfortunately, we have run completely out of time. And the call today is just for everyone to do the needful to ensure that we stay alive and alert. Well, today is World Mental Health Day, and that is why we just needed to bring this conversation on. Professor Taiwo Bindo, President, Association of Psychiatrists in Nigeria, thank you so much for your time this morning, as well as Dr. Otega Okinono, Head of Department, Sociology and Criminology, University of Delta, Agbo, Delta State. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Well, your own contribution to the program are next, and let's begin with this one by Abiro Kenneth. He writes in a mail, says, the bin of non-performance by government officials, among other causes, is the fact that in Nigeria, most appointments, especially the ministerial ones, are seen as thank you envelope. And when it is thus, the appointed person's readiness and ability to do the job well wouldn't be an issue anymore. This, I think, has to stop.
Well, this is from Ayobami Lugs. That's interesting. Lugs. Well, he's talking about understanding the issue around the civil service. He says, I've taken time over the recent years to understand the misconception of the issues around the civil service by journalists. The expressions which lay all the blame on civil servants are majorly in the realm of imagination and theories. So far from the truth which journalists have not uncovered. What are the roles of the political heads? Can you isolate them? Civil servants may be the accounting officers, but who is the overall head? Can a permanent secretary kick against instructions by the minister or commissioner? Claims that civil servants corrupt political heads is inadequate and the mere cover for the very corrupt tendencies in the political technocrats. It is unfortunate that not even journalists have done justice to investigate the real issues. Until that is done, we will continue to scratch the surface and keep going round the circle, which is the experience over the years in our country. Political heads are usually not called to account for actions, especially under the guise of not being the accounting officer. But that must change. They dish out instructions and should not be insulated from investigations as may be required. They lock up in the shadows and covers because they do not sign for funds, but they dish out directives even to the accounting officers. Please get the right understanding of the issues to fashion out a lasting solution to issues affecting our nation, especially in the negative. That was a long one. Well, that is it today. We thank you all for watching. Yeah, we'll dissect this much later. I think Ayo will as well. We'll see you next time. I am Chamberlain Uso. Goodbye.
Have a wonderful day and a productive one. I'm Ayo Makinde. Bye for now.
It begins when news breaks, but there's much more in the details. That's where Special Report comes into the picture, locating source and destination of the news.
Something needs to be done. We don't need to negotiate that. Government should see what we are doing.
Bringing your perspective to the fore.
If those arrested are those protesting against police brutality, I would say that such arrest is unjustified.
Exploring angles that may provide solutions, giving you the opportunity to understand the issues and make decisions. Watch Special Report on Channels Television. From the predictable to the unpredictable, news is fast-paced. On The World Today, we bring you stories from far and wide, narrating the intricacies of politics, diplomacy, war, and disasters. Join us as we make sense of it all, with in-depth coverage and analysis from across the globe. The World Today, every weekday at 5:30 p.m.
Like drops of rain, individuals and groups innovate, birthing ideas that might make the difference in the conversations and action to fight climate change and the negative impact of man's activities. Innovative thinking from Africa and Europe to save our planet, to light up our cities without tearing apart the ozone, making progress safe and sustainable. On Eco Africa, we highlight the efforts to live and grow sustainably at these times on Channels Television.
Hello, a very good morning to you and a warm welcome to our special coverage of Russian invasion of Ukraine with a particular focus on the conflict in the Middle East involving Israel and Hamas of the Gaza Strip. The headlines: Palestinian supporters rally in London say they will not be silenced. UN Chief Antonio Guterres, more world leaders react to Hamas strikes in Israel and plans for a counter-strike. Plus, Turkey's President Tayyip Erdogan calls on both sides to stop attacks, offers to mediate. We begin in the Middle East, and we thank you for joining us. Hundreds of protesters gathered in London to show solidarity with the Palestinian people yesterday as Israel went to war following an unprecedented attack from Hamas. Waving Palestinian flags and chanting slogans such as "We will not be silenced," protesters say the people of Palestine are the ones paying the highest price for a conflict that has been going on for decades. Fighters from Islamist group Hamas killed 700 Israelis and abducted dozens more as they attacked Israeli towns on Saturday. This is the deadliest incursion into Israeli territory since Egypt and Syria's attacks on the Yom Kippur War 50 years ago. In response, Israeli airstrikes hit housing blocks, tunnels, a mosque, and homes of Hamas officials in Gaza, killing more than 400 people, including children, in keeping with the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's vow of mighty vengeance.
We want the right to return. A lot of these innocent civilians in Israel are considered as innocent, but however they are settler, colonialists. This is not an equal war. They are people who occupy Gaza and the people in the West Bank. We're here because the next generation needs to understand that we will have a home to return to one day.
Of everything I've been seeing on the news, there's there seems to be a lot of misinformation about the actual events and who the real victims are here. It's a well-known fact that Gaza is under a blockade and has been for over 15 years. As you can see, there are a lot of people that agree that though there are atrocities being committed on both sides, it is ultimately the Palestinians that pay the highest price every time. The international community is very quick to support Israel and to make the Palestinians the enemy. But in truth, the Palestinians have been suffering far longer. And what we need is the international community to call out the illegal settlements.
That demonstration, before we go to the Justin Trudeau story, as that demonstration took place by Palestinian supporters in London, the Prime Minister of the UK, Rishi Sunak, says and condemned the attacks by Hamas in Israel. He says that he stands with Israel and the UK stands with Israel. He condemned the attacks as being barbaric and heinous. And he said that they stand with Israel, that is the UK, always and for all times. Meanwhile, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has blasted demonstrations across the country in support of the Palestinian Islamist group Hamas attack on Israel. Mr. Trudeau attended a solidarity gathering for Israel in Ottawa, where he condemned Hamas attacks in his address and affirmed Canada's support for Israel's right to defend itself. There were competing demonstrations and rallies through Monday in different groups across Canada, including Toronto, where about 1,000 protesters gathered in a demonstration organized by a group called Palestinian Youth Movement.
Of death and violence and terror has no place anywhere, including, especially here in Canada. So let me be very clear. Hamas terrorists aren't a resistance. They're not freedom fighters. They are terrorists, and no one in Canada should be supporting them, much less celebrating them. Canada unequivocally and in the strongest possible terms condemns these terrorist attacks perpetrated by Hamas. We stand with Israel and reaffirm our support for Israel's right to defend itself in accordance with international law. The indiscriminate killing of civilians, the sexual violence, the violence against women, children, and elderly people, these acts are sickening and completely unimaginable. But what happened this weekend during a Jewish holiday on Shabbat was the opposite of hope. It was dark, abhorrent, and heinous. Nearly every Jewish Canadian has friends or family in Israel. My friends, you are not alone. Canadians stand with the Jewish community. Canadians stand with Israel, and we stand ready to support the Israeli people. If we want to win against terrorists, dictators, and bullies, upholding the rule of law must continue to be our rampart. Protecting civilian life must continue to be our rampart. And as you know very well, being there for one another will always be our strongest rampart against hatred. We stand with you, my friends, tonight, tomorrow, and every day.
Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau. Meanwhile, the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres is deeply distressed by an announcement that Israel will initiate a complete siege of the Gaza Strip following an attack by the Palestinian Islamist group Hamas over the weekend. The Israeli military announced it had called up an unprecedented 300,000 reservists. It was imposing a total blockade of the Gaza Strip in response to Hamas attacks that killed hundreds of Israelis and prompted retaliatory attacks by Israel, while noting that medical equipment, food and other humanitarian supplies and personnel are needed, Mr. Guterres says that relief and entry of essential supplies into the area must be facilitated.
Let me begin by repeating my utter condemnation of the abhorrent attacks by Hamas and others against Israeli towns and villages in the Gaza periphery, which have left over 800 Israelis dead and more than 2,500 injured. Sadly, these numbers are expected to rise as the attacks are ongoing and many remain unaccounted for. In addition, over 100, possibly more, Israelis, civilians and military, have been reported captured by armed groups, including women, children, and the elderly. Some are being held hostage inside Israel, and many others have been taken inside the Gaza Strip. Meanwhile, Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad have launched thousands of indiscriminate rockets that have reached central Israel, including Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. I recognize the legitimate grievances of the Palestinian people, but nothing can justify these acts of terror and the killing, maiming, and abduction of civilians. I reiterate my call to immediately cease these attacks and release all hostages. In the face of these unprecedented attacks, Israeli airstrikes have pounded Gaza. I'm deeply alarmed by reports of over 500 Palestinians, including women and children, killed in Gaza and over 3,000 injured. Unfortunately, these numbers are rising by the minute as Israeli operations continue.
Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro has expressed his support for the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas and called for a ceasefire in the Middle East. During his weekly television show, Maduro says that followers of all religions should come together to demand for the United Nations resolutions to be respected, adding that Palestinians' rights to their independence, territory, and peace should be re-established. Mr. Abbas called on the UN to immediately intervene to prevent the occurrence of a humanitarian catastrophe due to what he calls the ongoing Israeli aggression, especially in Gaza. In his words, Japan, on its part, strongly condemned the attacks against Israel by the Islamist militants. Chief Cabinet Secretary in Japan, Hirokazu Matsuno, speaking at a regular news conference, says attacks against innocent civilians could never be justified. He added that there were no reports of harm to the lives of Japanese nationals resulting from the conflict. Meanwhile, supporters of Israel in South America gathered in Buenos Aires and Santiago to show their solidarity with the Jewish state 2 days after it came under attack by Palestinian Islamist group Hamas. In Buenos Aires, thousands of people participated in a vigil organized by Argentine Jewish community holding lanterns and Israeli flags. The Jewish community in Santiago, Chile's capital, gathered at the headquarters of the Israeli Sephardic community of Chile and released white and blue balloons to call for an end to the conflict. Meanwhile, the Palestinians in Chile called on the international community to stop the conflict in the Middle East as children made placards and painted their hands red to represent the civilians killed during the conflict in the Gaza Strip. From South America to North America, New York City Mayor Eric Adams and some of the city's Jewish community leaders held a vigil on Monday in support of the victims of Hamas attacks on Israel. Adams was joined at the Golden Meir Square by rabbis, lawmakers, and Jewish activists and diplomats. The violence, which has claimed more than 1,500 lives, prompted international declarations of support for Israel over a devastating weekend attack by Hamas and appeals for an end to the fighting and protection of civilians. New York is home to the largest Jewish population outside Israel.
I am in so much pain from what I saw and what I witnessed. Nothing can justify pulling innocent children from their homes, murdering them, dragging them through the streets, laying your feet across their bodies. Nothing can justify what we witnessed. Nothing can justify what we witnessed.
And unlike our ancestors, this time around, we also have a state. And we also have an army. And those terrorists, they don't know what gate of hell they just opened. We're gonna go there and we're gonna smoke them out of their caves and we're gonna take them one after one after one after one. There will be no Hamas after this.
Not just by the atrocities, although that's enough, but by their accomplices here in New York, marching in front of my office saying resistance. Let me tell you something, rape is not resistance. Murder is not a political movement. And these people will end where evil always does, on the ashes of history.
That took place in New York, and staying there in the United States, a U.S. expert is warning that fighting between Hamas and Israel in the Middle East will present massive global challenges. Saeed, Associate Dean at New York University Center for Global Affairs, Caroline Kisane, says there are likely no good options in the matter for the United States. She added that much will depend on how Israel fights the war.
Good afternoon. Today, the people of Israel are under attack, orchestrated by a terrorist organization, Hamas. In this moment of tragedy, I want to say to them and to the world and to terrorists everywhere that the United States stands with Israel.
Israel's support is from kind of expected sources. Where it, I think, becomes a big question mark is as the war continues. Again, we're just very, very early into it, and as the death toll increases, and depending on the means with which, and to date, what we've seen is, it's pretty. Israel will be indiscriminate in its violence as it relates to Gaza, and which, again, up to a point, there will be kind of support. But as the Palestinian death toll increases, you can imagine that there will be growing internal domestic opposition across countries that are, putting its support towards Israel.
And Turkey's President Tayyip Erdogan is urging Israel to stop bombing Palestinian land and Palestine to stop harassing Israeli civilian settlements. Speaking after a cabinet meeting, Erdogan says Turkey is ready to mediate between Israelis and Palestinians on all fronts, including prisoner swaps, if the sides request it. He added that he had spoken to the Palestinian leader Mahmoud Abbas and Israeli President Isaac Herzog earlier in the day and expressed his sadness over the deaths of civilians. Erdogan has warned against steps that will escalate tensions further and indicated that Ankara will intensify diplomatic efforts to stop the fighting. He added that Turkey is preparing humanitarian aid for Gaza. Still ahead, Mexico deploys planes to Israel to return nationals. Please join us again.
Millions of people living together in one community. together in the same trade. We go into their myths, find out how they live and work.
Oh my goodness, food business is not an easy business. I spent more than 35 years for this community.
We tell these stories and how to survive in this economy. Community Report, we tell your story.
Our website, channelstv.com, has more information on our top stories and others. Subscribe and watch Channels Television's live stream on YouTube and other social media platforms using your mobile device browser, or download the Channels TV app for Android and iOS devices from their respective stores. You can also watch us via your smart TV platforms on Apple TV, Android TV, Fire TV, and Roku. Channels Television, ubiquitous.
Welcome to the So For More stretch of today's special coverage of Russian invasion of Ukraine, with a special focus on the conflict in the Middle East between Israel and Hamas. Joining us this morning is retired U.S. Army Captain, National Defense and Military Strategist, Captain Bish Johnson, joining us in our Abuja studios for more perspectives on the war. Good morning and welcome to the program.
Good morning and thank you, Olumide, for having me.
It's good to have you. Hamas called their attack on Israel Al-Aqsa flood. Israel described their own counteroffensive as the Operation Swords of Iron. What is your perspective of the state of world peace as these two sides go against each other?
Olumide, the world is at a precipice right now. With multiple conflicts in different fronts around the globe. And that speaks again to the positions that I've held earlier of inability of international bodies to be able to contain or prevent some of all these conflicts that we see around the globe. But let me say this. Hamas does not represent the Palestinian people. What we saw on Saturday was very barbaric. I don't think there's anything in this world that justifies the use of violence against innocent civilians, whether they are Palestinians or they are Israelis, particularly children, women, and the elderly. So what we witnessed this past weekend was very, very condemnable and can never be justified for any reason at all.
You say Hamas does not represent the Palestinian people, but it was the Palestinian people that elected Hamas as the ruling government against the Fatah regime of Yasser Arafat when he was alive. And now that it has come to this point, can there be made a distinction between Hamas and the people in Gaza?
Well, as you know, Gaza is not the only territory of the Palestinian. If you go to West Bank, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, PLO, is in charge over there. Hamas may have been elected by the Palestinians in Gaza, but I doubt how much of that popularity that Hamas still enjoys in the Gaza Strip. The actions that they took this weekend, the repercussions and the after effect of that action is the brunt of it is going to be borne by innocent Palestinians who have absolutely nothing connected to what Hamas did this past weekend. The best way to fight for liberation is not to kill innocent people that have nothing to do with your agitation. And so when I say that they don't speak for the Palestinians. The Palestinian Liberation Organization is the recognized entity that speaks on behalf of the Palestinian people, whether it's at the United Nations or any other international forum. The Hamas is a terrorist organization, and it should be seen as such.
When the events unfolded and they carried out their incursion into the Israeli territory by land, terrestrial, by sea, amphibious, and by air, using hand gliders, obviously it's a long thought out plan, and there was a lot of training involved. Some have blamed or, well, they've pointed out that there was a sort of breakdown in intelligence on the part of the Israelis, whether the military intelligence, Amman, or the internal intelligence network of Shin Bet or Mossad, that it got to this point, and it was carried out at such a scale. 1,000 people breaking their defenses, going through their walls, and carrying on this attack for quite a while before there was a response. What is your understanding of what could have, of the breakdown that could have happened?
Well, you know, Olamide, you see, all it takes for these criminals to succeed is just once. But for any security agency to succeed, it will take you 100% of the time to be able to keep your guards. What happened was that the Israelis let loose their guard, particularly this past weekend as they celebrate their Jewish festival, and that was quite unfortunate. For a country that lives in such a hostile environment, I don't think that any time of the year should be taken for granted. You know, maybe they've done it in the past and nothing happened, and so they did it this year, let their guard loose, and then this is the consequences of letting your guard loose. When you find yourself in such an environment, you must keep up your guard at all times, particularly at the 50th anniversary of the Yom Kippur War. So they should have anticipated that something, maybe symbolic is going to happen around that period. And so I don't know how there was such massive intelligence failure on the part of the Israelis to be able to detect that something of this nature will be taking place. Because what happened, the manner in which this incursion was carried out was not something that was just planned in 1 day or 2 days or 1 month. This was an elaborate incursion that required elaborate planning over a period of time, including supply of logistics, because most of those rockets that were fired were never produced in the Gaza Strip. Even if they were produced in the Gaza Strip, they may not have gotten all the components from within Gaza Strip. So there were coordination and planning with outside forces, including the training, as you had rightly pointed out. And so all those things added together, the Israelis ought to have been able to pick up from even one segment of the entire process. Had they picked up from just one segment of the entire process, either supply of logistics or components or training, they would have been able to, if not completely prevent this attack from taking place, but they would have been able to mitigate it or reduce it to the barest minimum.
It raises a very pertinent question that where did they get the supply of weapons from? It has been reported that never at this scale has Hamas been able to muster these sorts of rockets. They say they fired up to 5,000 rockets on the first day. Israel said it was more in the neighborhood of 2,500. But the IDF says that they've used hand-propelled grenades, rocket-propelled grenades, I beg your pardon. They've used all sorts of other weapons. And there are reports that it's possible that some of these weapons were curried from the black market and from out of the war in Ukraine. And accusations that there were some instances at the beginning of the Ukrainian war where some elements were putting some of the weapons being supplied to Ukraine on the black market. And that was a possible source to funnel some of these weapons into the hands of the Hamas.
Well, I think these questions have been posed to both Israeli and the U.S. experts, and their response had been that at this material time, they are focusing on how to stop the incursion, how to free those that have been held hostage, and how to decapitate Hamas so that it's no longer a very potent terrorist organization as it used to be. Look, the source of the weapons that Hamas had deployed in this incursion may not have and could not have come from just one source. It's possible they could have, gotten one or two of them from the black market, but the elaborate nature of that attack suggests to me that there must be the hands of a state actor that had probably helped these people in assembling all of those equipment. What about the training? Did they also get the training from the black market? No. The planning of it, was it from the black market? No. So I think investigation will reveal at the end of the day where and how they were able to not just only get those weapons, but how they were able to source the funding, because it required money as well, and how they were able to get the training for them to have breached one of the most fortified borders in the world and penetrate into Israel at the manner in which they did, with precision. And in fact, they had elaborate intelligence of military formations, as well as what the civilians were doing at the other side of the border. So in my view, there must be some level of state actor involvement in what has happened in Israel this past weekend.
One of those state actors, of course, will be Iran, who denied any involvement in this attack, although they support Hamas. Obviously, Hezbollah supports Hamas. With your military experience, can you give us an idea of the sort of predicaments the IDF finds itself with having to neutralize the threat of Hamas and at the same time recovering these over 100 hostages, men, women, children? There were octogenarians there, a Holocaust survivor, 80-year-old women, babies. We saw the babies that were abducted with their mothers as well. So how does the IDF go about this matter?
Olumide, this is going to be very, very, very difficult for the Israelis. With these hostages now part of the equation. It would have been a lot more easier to have dealt with this situation if you do not have, hostages that had been, taken back into Gaza as leverage and human shield. I think Hamas knew exactly what it was doing. Their plan was to go in there, inflict as much damage in terms of, lives and treasure on the Israelis, take some people, a reasonable number of Israeli people, citizens hostage, so that they can use them as leverage and they can use them to slow down Israeli incursion into the Gaza Strip, because they know that there will be consequences for their action. And so they planned for it, and part of that plan is to take enough hostages as a human shield and as a bargaining leverage, when the Israelis eventually do respond. You can see the difference between Israeli response now and what their response had been in the previous time that this similar thing had happened, though not at the magnitude that it happened this weekend. The Israelis are not quick, to carry out land incursion into the Gaza Strip, because of these very reasons that we are talking about right now, because of the hostages that the Palestinians had, that Hamas had taken. Because if they do that, it's possible they may end up killing some of those hostages themselves, or Hamas may begin to execute them like they had, warned that they would do if they go that route. That is why you see them now focusing mostly on area bombardment, targeting some facilities and, infrastructures, could be able to degrade the capability of Hamas. Don't be surprised that Hamas may have also booby-trapped the entire city to make land incursion or to slow it down, or to make it difficult or to slow it down. So that is the scenario that the Israelis find themselves. It's a nightmare scenario. It's a very complicated scenario. It's a very, very difficult scenario for any military commander to find himself in.
And to another difficult question as regards public global perception of the war. Never since the invasion of Ukraine by Russia has attention shifted away from that conflict to the Middle East in this fashion. And that's why on Russian invasion of Ukraine, this program, we had no choice but to focus on the Middle East. We heard from the president of Venezuela saying that he supports the Palestinian cause, mentioning Mahmoud Abbas and saying that the Palestinians have a right to express their disdain against the Israelis and the occupation of the Israelis and what have you. And we have the British Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak. We have the Canadian Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau. We have President Joe Biden saying that they stand with Israel. But at the same time, we have countries in the Middle East saying that they understand and they stand with Hamas. This is a polarizing time. How do you think this can be resolved? And can the United Nations at this point do anything?
Well, it's quite unfortunate. What you're seeing playing out in terms of who to support is the support, following these similar, traditional allies, an enemy of my enemy is my friend. That is why you see Maduro supporting the Palestinians, because now the U.S. is on this side. And so they will align themselves in the same way they have aligned themselves, with the Russian and Ukraine war. Of course, the Arab nations will traditionally support their Arab brothers. Now, what the UN can do? I don't think that the UN can do anything. UN has never been able to do anything in instances like this. The most that the UN can do is to be able to bargain for, delivery of humanitarian services into the Gaza Strip, so that the people will have food and water and medicine and stuff like that. But as far as like getting anything serious or tangible from the UN, I don't see that happening. Instead, it may have to come from, countries like Qatar, or any of all these Arab nations or Mid-Eastern countries that have some level of influence over Hamas. But for the UN, I don't think that UN can do much in that respect.
Captain Bish Johnson, we thank you for your analysis at this difficult time for the Middle East, this difficult time for the world.
Thank you very much, Olumide, for having me. It's a pleasure being here.
Captain Bish Johnson is a retired U.S. Army captain, a national defense and military strategist that joined us from Abuja. Now, the Mexican army is carrying out humanitarian flights aimed at bringing home its nationals from Israel and the attack on the country by the Palestinian Islamist group Hamas. An unknown number of hostages were taken by Hamas after it launched a surprise attack in Israel on Saturday. Foreign Minister Alicia Bárcena says 2 Mexicans are believed to have been amongst those taken by the group. President Andrés Manuel López Obrador said on Monday in a press conference 2 humanitarian flights to retrieve Mexicans would leave for Israel. According to López Obrador, some 5,000 Mexican nationals are in Israel and some 300 have asked to leave. Londoners have gathered on Downing Street to show their support for Israel 2 days after Hamas' surprise attack. Demonstrators held signs reading, "I stand with Israel," and 7th October 2023, the day the most Jews have been killed since the Holocaust. A protester by the name Dan Cohen says the conflict is not about proportion of land, but is a war of religion and religious supremacy. More than 10 Britons are feared dead or missing in Israel, according to officials, although Foreign Minister James Cleverly said he will not speculate on the number of British or dual nationals in the area. The leaders of the United States, Britain, France, and Germany are expected to discuss the situation in Israel and the Palestinian territories.
Just open your eyes. Just open your eyes and don't listen to all the fake news you see online. Every story has 2 sides.
I want them to be really strong with the EU and with the allies around aid that goes to the Palestinian Authority and the United Nations into the education system. After winning the war, the education system has to be changed. That's what I want to happen. It's one thing taking Hamas and destroying them, but then you've got a nation that's been brought up on hate. And after World War II, we had denazification across Europe, all the schools, and in Japan also. We have to change the education system if we're going to win the peace. I came here to stand with Israel, who's got to fight a war in order to make a peace.
Today we saw the true face of the Free Palestine movement. I think today everybody saw that it's nothing to do with coexistence or land and everything to do with wanting to wipe out the Jewish state and every Jew inside it. I think everybody has seen why we have a border fence now, why we need soldiers, and why we don't have peace. And it's nothing to do with land, it's nothing to do with this proportion of land or that proportion of land, or access to holy sites, all of which we have offered to the Palestinians 5 times already. It's not a war over land, it's a war over religion and religious supremacy, and one side not willing to compromise.
Meanwhile, destruction continues in Gaza as Israeli airstrikes continue to bombard the enclave. People in Gaza City are searching through the rubble of destroyed buildings and sitting inside damaged buildings today following airstrikes. Gaza's health ministry said at least 687 Palestinians had been killed and 3,726 wounded in Israel airstrikes on the blockaded enclave since Saturday. Apartment blocks, a mosque and hospitals are among the sites attacked, and the strikes destroyed some roads and houses, according to media reports and eyewitnesses. Israeli TV channels say the death toll from the Hamas attack had climbed to 900 Israelis, with at least 2,600 injured and dozens taken captive. Israeli Zaka Rescue Service has retrieved over 100 bodies from the small Israeli community of Be'eri near the border with the Gaza Strip. A kibbutz, or collective farm, is amongst the worst hit of the 14 Israeli border communities overrun by Hamas terrorists. Local media say more than 100 residents were killed, and that amounted to some 10% of its population. An Israeli military spokesperson said troops responding to Saturday's mass infiltration killed between 70 and 100 gunmen in or around the area. Now joining us is Nigeria's former ambassador to Switzerland, Ambassador Joseph Ayalogu, speaking to us from our Abuja studios in north-central Nigeria. Thank you for making out the time to be with us.
Yeah, thank you, Lumide.
I'm so glad that, yes, good morning, sir. I'm so glad you're here because for your perspective and your insights in these sorts of issues and with your experience worldwide. When you saw the images of the children that were dragged into Gaza, the women that were abused, children abused, the elderly women, the infirm, the physically challenged that were taken into Gaza, and the manner in which they were taken, and the number of people that had been killed, what was your first thought?
Well, that of shock. These acts of inhumanity tend to shock people, and I was definitely shocked. Also very worried because I know there are bound to be consequences, and sad again that the Arab-Israel-Palestinian crisis have festered for decades now, and we don't seem to have a lasting solution to it. So that is it, sad.
Now, nationals from the Philippines are either missing or killed. Britons either missing or killed. Cambodians either missing or killed. We understand about 11 Americans now said to be killed. As of yesterday, it was 9 to 11 Americans confirmed to be killed by Hamas in this incident. What sort of scenario does that present for the United States and for Britain and for these nations where their nationals have been killed in this affair? Especially, I want you to focus on the United States for now. Do they have will there be a tendency for them to assist their natural ally Israel in a more comprehensive way than they've been doing?
Yeah, well, we can see that the collection of countries indicates the growing internationality of that region. People go for religious and tourist reasons. Well, for the U.S., of course, we know there's a very strong relationship between Israel and the U.S. A lot of Israelis are actually U.S. citizens and so on. So there is bound to be a tendency to support Israel, especially as we are considering that what we have is an action by a terrorist group that has been so described. So the only way forward is for the U.S. to give as much support, help that will be needed by Israel. And they're already doing that. The political supports have been voiced by the president, and I'm sure that whatever needs in terms of humanitarian supplies and so on will be given to Israel. But again, it's happening on both sides now, the humanitarian issues. So the world would have to look at both sides and offer what will be needed. But I think at the end of the day, we need to get to the root of the problem and try to deal with them.
Do you fear that the United States will be dragged into the conflict in a military way? The United States State Department say that they have moved a Navy carrier closer to Israel and fighter jets closer to Israel because of the death of these United States citizens. There was a time where if a citizen of the United States perished in this manner, the reprisal will be instant and very fearful. And many nations were wary of involving United States nationals, not to talk of Israeli nationals, in this sort of conflict. Is there a danger or is there a chance that the United States will face agitation from within the United States to take a more combative approach against Hamas?
Well, the fear again is further militarization of the area because, there are definitely some groups, even state actors, that are supporting the Hamas, and it wouldn't be a very good thing to see a lot more escalation of the military angle. But of course, the U.S. takes its responsibility to protect its sovereign, nationals seriously. So we're not surprised that it's moving arms, moving the battleship very close to watch things and to see whether there would be, I would say that their purpose would be to see whether there will be any specific need to help Israel. Israel on its own tend to know how to pull its own punches, so I'm sure they are doing they're giving as much as they get. So maybe not too much of the U.S. Specific input will be required. But it's good to make those, it's interesting that they're making those moves, even if for the purpose of having an effect, body language.
Now, Hamas have explained the Palestinian position as that of the eventual reaction to years of occupation, years of denial of their human rights by the Israelis, years of the blockade. By the way, now the blockade is worse because there's a food blockade, electricity blockade, fuel blockade. We heard the Israeli Defense Minister Gallant saying that that was how they will be treated until this affair is sorted out. But these considerations of the Palestinians and of Hamas is what precipitated this act of theirs that started on Saturday. Is it justifiable?
Well, we know the background to the crisis there. were away for a long time, and then they came back in 1946 or thereabout and occupied a territory that Palestinians feel should be theirs. Of course, we've all agreed that these territories are not exclusive to Palestine. That is at the root of the problem. Issue of land, issue of territorial ownership. It hasn't been resolved, even though there are, of course, after the Yom Kippur War and Israel spread beyond what was the perceived borders then into the Gaza Strip, it has continued to fester. I am not surprised that nobody should be surprised that the Hamas or the Palestinians like how they are treated, and nothing has made them or been given to them to make them stop the way they feel. At the end of the day, that's what the world must really address. There are these tendencies to build settlements here and there. It's definitely a problem. So the two countries are living in a high wire, tense situation. They all have rights to the claims they make, but where one oversteps the other, there has to be a third party to really decide that this would be the way to go. Incidentally, at times, even the third party efforts, especially by the UN, have not helped matters.
I wish we had more time for more discussions on this, but we thank you so far for the light that you've shed on this matter. Ambassador Joseph Ayalogu, Nigeria's former ambassador to Switzerland, who joined us from Abuja.
Thank you.
Now to the Russia-Ukraine crisis. A disused Armenian textile factory has become a sanctuary for artists and other immigrants from Russia, Iran, and Ukraine whose lives have been turned upside down by war or political turmoil. Abandoned workshops that once produced Soviet knitwear have been turned into a creative space for painters, puppet makers, and photographers, and a venture that is helping to revitalize a town in decline. Launched in 2022, the project, called Abistan Shelter in Armenian, is open to participants and guests from around the world.
It was abandoned school in Soviet times. When it became fabric factory, so it got abandoned again. And 1 year ago, Tumanian Foundation of this town, small town, gave this place to Russian people who was running from a war, so they can live here and it will be like a shelter for them. And that's the name. Abastan in Armenian means shelter.
If I want to compare to Iran, I feel that we are more sad there, that we are completely paralyzed by bad news. And for me, it was last year, was like 6 months just reading news and paralyzed and think you couldn't do anything except, I mean, all the artists were thinking that we are united to do something for the movement, for we were say revolution. So it's good. You can do it in, when you are sad and upset, it gives you some possibility and some creation. But here, the thing is, all the people are so alive. The thing is, all your friends and relatives, like maybe in Russia, all of them just are in different places in the world. We are not in the same place anymore. And it feels that your home is not your home. Maybe you understand.
Finally, local residents of the small Ukrainian village of Roza on Monday wept next to coffins as they buried relatives and neighbors after a Russian missile slammed into a village cafe and killed at least 52 people. The small village community in the southeastern Kharkiv region was devastated by one of the deadliest missile strikes of the war after a Russian Iskander missile hit the cafe where people gathered to mourn a fallen Ukrainian soldier. After DNA tests, 11 bodies were handed out to family members on Monday. The village, which had a population of 500 before the war, was seized by Russia in the early days of the invasion and was recaptured by Kyiv in the September 2022, along with neighboring areas. That's it on today's special coverage of Russian invasion of Ukraine with a bias for the conflict in the Middle East between Israel and Hamas. I'm Olumide Macaulay. Thank you for watching.
It's October 10th, 2023, right here in Lagos, Nigeria. Good morning, good evening, wherever in the world you're watching from. It's Business Morning live from Channels HQ right here in Lagos. We have a packed show for you this morning. But first, let's take a look at some news now. We see the Central Bank of Nigeria has affirmed that the introduction of the e-Naira does not pose a threat to the country's financial stability. The CBN countered claims suggesting that the e-Naira could jeopardize financial inclusion, asserting that its central bank digital currency is both secure and instrumental in expanding financial accessibility. Issa Abdulmuin, the Director of Corporate Communications at CBN, addressed concerns of unsafe digital currency and clarified that some misinterpretations had arisen due to a lack of understanding of certain sections of the recently released Economics of Digital Currencies, a book of readings. And to the oil market, now we see global oil market prices edged down slightly today after gaining more than 4% in the previous session. That was yesterday. Brent crude fell 18 cents to $87.97 a barrel, while US WTI crude eased 16 cents, about 0.2% down to $86.22 a barrel. Both benchmarks had gained more than $3.50 on Monday on the news of conflict after falling steeply in volatile trading that was last week. We'll keep tracking what's driving sentiment in the market there. And back here, as part of gains of the deregulation of the downstream sector, Nigeria is set to become a net exporter of petroleum products by 2024. That's according to the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited, NNPCL. The company's Group Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Mele Kyari, stated this at the second edition of the Energy and Labor Summit, organized by the Petroleum and Natural Gas Senior Staff Association of Nigeria, PENGASSN. However, the president of PENGASSN, Mr. Festus Asifo, is lamenting the economic impact of the subsidy removal on Nigerians, especially the low-income earners. Take a listen.
NNPC Limited. It's the second edition of the Energy and Labor Summit organized by the Petroleum and Natural Gas Senior Staff Association of Nigeria, PENGASSN. One more time. The keynote speaker is the Group Chief Executive Officer of the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited, Mr. Mele Kyari. He opens the conversation by dwelling on the gains of the Petroleum Industry Act.
There are today over close to 25 licenses to create refineries. Build and operate refineries. Nobody could take the next step because as long as you do not have certainty around pricing and who is going to pay for that difference, no one will put his money.
This opens the door to the conversations that followed, especially on the removal of fuel subsidy.
We had inadequate supply and dubious distribution of petroleum products, corruption, monopolistic practices, misappropriation, bunkering, trafficking of refined products to other countries.
As we stand at the crossroads of energy transition and calls for greener sources of energy, it is imperative that we come together to chart a new course in view of the fact that the deregulation of the petroleum industry and promotion of gas utilization are not merely policy changes.
However, the labor unions have suggestions on how to cushion the impact of subsidy removal.
Recent policy direction by the government has placed untold hardship on Nigerians, chief of which is the PMS subsidy removal and the floating of the Naira-dollar exchange rate. The overwhelming impact of these on Nigerians can only be imagined rather than experienced. Part of the decisions of floating has only benefited the government and oil and gas companies in Nigeria.
The organized labor in Nigeria is less than 10% of generality of Nigerians who are working. So we need to also factor in the other Nigerians and their benefit. The way they can benefit, it has to do with transportation. Then the second aspect is that we also need to look at the other parts of life, what I would call the soft aspect of it, healthcare, education.
The ideas and strategies developed at this annual summit is expected to be shared with players in the industry to address the critical issues in the nation's oil and gas